righty. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Community Safety Committee. My co-chair, Mrs. Cindy Bendel, we're here. Is Detective Scott Newsy on?
No?
Okay.
Okay, so then we'll introduce Venus Ganselberry, who's the Outreach Coordinator at Civilian Complaint Review Board, the CCRB. Are you ready to present?
Yes, sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Venus. I'm a longtime resident of Brooklyn, rep East New York. Um, I'm happy to be here tonight and to present some information about the CCRB as well as some updates that we have been up to so far. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. And can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So, good evening, CB14 Community Safety Committee. I am the Brooklyn Outreach Coordinator for the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board, and I cover all parts of Brooklyn, North and South. So I'm very happy to be in this position. So, just some information that we probably already know. The CCRB is the nation's largest independent oversight entity of the largest police force in the country. We investigate, mediate, and prosecute complaints of misconduct against members of the NYPD. And the CCRB is staffed entirely with civilian employees who are primarily investigators and attorneys. So that's something that we really like to emphasize to civilians and anyone who we come across to, that the CCRB is a civilian oversight. There are civilians like me and you who come to work every day to handle, police misconduct complaints. No one from the NYPD works at the CCRB. So it's completely civilian oversight to gain that police accountability. So, just an overview of the CCRB's board. We are governed by a 15-member board. So the selection process goes like this. The New York City mayor appoints 5 members to the board. New York City Council appoints 5 members from each borough to gain perception of all New Yorkers. The NYPD Police Commissioner designates 3 members who have law enforcement experience. And a lot of people sometimes they're not too happy about that, but it's really important that out of 15 members, we have some members who are civilians and have law enforcement experience to gain that perception. Police officers know the job better than anyone because they do the job. So the fact that we have civilians who have served as officers, who have served in some type of law enforcement experience, it puts a lot of things in perspective and they bring a unique point of view to the board. But these police commissioner designees have to gain the approval by the mayor. So the NYC Public Advocate's Office appoints 1 member. And lastly, with the joint collaboration of the mayor and city council, they will appoint the chair. And our current chair is Miss Arva Rice. So the NYPD has strict rules of which they file, and this is carried out in the police patrol guide. And this patrol guide lists the best practices, policies, and procedures of the NYPD's job. Now, the CCRB uses the patrol guide to assess whether or not police misconduct has occurred. So our investigators read the patrol guide and they refer back to it when they do their investigations. So, what types of allegations are within our jurisdiction? So, it's force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, and offensive language. And we use the acronym FATO as a helpful reminder. So, to go over all of the allegations real quickly, Force is, excessive or unnecessary physical force. So, for instance, like if I push a police officer and then a police officer pushes me back and then starts, hitting me with a baton, that may look like excessive force because that officer used more force than what I put onto them. And these are the examples. Also, the expression of a firearm. If a police officer points a firearm at a civilian, that's also a complaint that we can definitely investigate, because you have to have sufficient reason or sufficient cause to use your firearm, whether or not you discharge anything. Secondly is abuse of authority, and this is misrepresenting power or influence to gain compliance. And this is the CCRB's highest volume of complaints because, abuse of authority is wide. Police officers use a lot of discretion when they do their job. So, some types of abuse of authority allegations may look like stops, questions, and frisk of a person's vehicles and residencies without sufficient cause, searches of those things without sufficient cause, improper entry. A really big one is threatening to call ICE. We all know that, New York City is a sanctuary city. So, immigration, custom enforcement is not within the NYPD's jurisdiction. And we see that a lot of times NYPD officers use this tactic in vulnerable communities that are heavily populated with immigrants or undocumented people, as a tactic to get them to comply with whatever they are asking for. So we like to stress this a lot, that threatening to call ICE is a form of abuse of authority. Forcible removal to a hospital is also a form of abuse of authority, because there's certain policies and procedures that officers need to take in order to just deem someone um, mentally ill enough that they need to be in a hospital. Um, and lastly, the last two is sexual misconduct and bias-based policing and racial profiling. So just to go into detail, these are two new allegations that recently went into effect last year. Sexual misconduct is one allegation that we've gotten jurisdiction over. Usually it was the police department's jurisdiction, but we got this to be our jurisdiction through trials in court. And these are the lists below. I don't want to read them out because I know this may be triggering for some people. So just take a minute to look at the allegations of sexual misconduct. So the next and last new allegation that we have is bias-based policing and racial profiling. And this is an encounter stemming from a specific incident that is like motivated or based on discrimination against a person's race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, housing status, or disability. So some examples for sexual orientation. A lot of people are like, how can that be, bias-based policing? If I like to be referred to as they or them, and officer, calls me miss or ma'am, and I've corrected them, but they just keep on calling me that, and they do it several times, that may be an allegation that I can file a complaint with, because they're disregarding how I would like to be referred to. So that's just an example of bias-based policing. So the D in FATO stands for discourtesy, and this is speaking, gesturing, or behaving rudely. So, officers do have they are public servants. They have a certain level of professionalism to uphold as public servants, and they have a certain level of customer service that they have to grant every civilian that they encounter. So with foul language, right? Some common misconceptions is that police officers can't use foul language, and that's not true. They can use foul language to take control of situations that are getting out of hand. So, for instance, if they're at, they'll say, let's say, for instance, um, they're at a protest and, telling people to like leave is not enough, they may have to use some foul language to control the crowd. But for instance, of a foul language allegation that isn't within a patrol guide is, for instance, if I, say the F word at a police officer and they say the F word back, that may be an allegation that we can investigate because, like I said, again, they're public servants, they have a certain level of professionalism, and they're not supposed to go tit for tat with with a an officer, with a civilian. And I'll answer all the questions afterwards. So I see your question and I'll get back to you. So the O in FATO stands for offensive language, and this is using verbally offensive speech. And this looks like racial and religious slurs, and also language that inappropriately refers to race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. So now let's talk about the Right to Know Act law. So this is a very important law that affects your interactions with NYPD officers. And this was basically pushed because the CCRB had gathered data dating all the way back from 2006 that showed series of stop and frisks that were unconstitutional. So the CCRB, with the help of city council and legislation, we pushed out a local law that states that every time during certain frisk searches at sobriety checkpoints and other encounters, officers should, one, identify themselves by providing their name and other information such as their rank, command, and shield number. And this is because civilians should know who is encountering them and which officer is interacting with them. Secondly, with some exceptions, they should explain the purpose of this interaction. Now, an exception could be if I have a visible weapon on me, a police officer shouldn't, disclose that information and say, I'm stopping you because you have a visible weapon. That may jeopardize, their safety and the safety of others. So that's one example of an exception that to that second rule. Thirdly, they should inform you of the right to say no when asking for your consent to search a person's property, vehicle, or home. This is the most important part of the Right to Know Act because a lot of times, as civilians, we see police officers as an authoritative figure because they are. And when they ask questions, it sometimes can be translated as commands. So the officer is, they're obligated to say during consensual searches, you have that right to say no. So they allow that civilian to have the autonomy to decline that, consent search. And lastly, they should offer a business card with the officer's information that explains how to comment or complain about interaction with an NYPD officer. And civilians may request this business card in all interactions, but the officers should offer. So this is how the Right to Know Act business card looks like. And the front is some general information, the police officer's name, their shield number, and command. And on the back, it has some more information on how to request that body-worn camera footage if needed, or if available, and also how to submit and comment a complaint. And it has the website and the number for that. You can call 311, and also some general information like Crime Stoppers and counterterrorism hotline. So there's 4 ways on how you can file a complaint. Firstly, you can always call our hotline. The number is right there. You can also call 311 and ask to be directed to the CCRB. You can also visit our office at 100 Church Street, 10th floor, Lower Manhattan, to make a in-person complaint, and you will be able to speak to an intake right then and there. For those who want a more hands-on experience with filing complaints. Thirdly, you can always file online. This is the most like easiest way to file a complaint. You can file online at our website. That's the website right there. You can also DM us on social media. We have the platforms of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or you can always mail a complaint at our office. And lastly, you can file a complaint at your local precinct. The NYPD is required to accept CCRB complaints at any precinct or request a complaint form or postage-free envelope just in case you don't feel comfortable filing at your local precinct or any precinct rather. You can request a complaint form so you can mail that complaint in yourself. So who can file? The CCRB accepts complaints from anyone who has a concern about the conduct of a police officer, and this is including non-New York City residents. So if I'm coming from South Carolina and I happen to experience or witness police misconduct, I can definitely file a complaint. The CCRB takes complaints regardless of a person's immigration status, and we never ask complainants about their immigration status or witnesses as well, because we're a sanctuary city, so we don't want to deter undocumented people. And lastly, the CCRB has translation services available in all languages for people with limited English proficiency. And this is because we just want to make sure that we meet people where they at. We don't want to exclude a population that isn't, English proficient. So we make sure that we have all of the languages available for any civilian that needs. So I must talk about the life of a CCRB case. So firstly, the intake will speak with the complainant. They will speak to them, or the intake will review that written complaint, and they will decide whether or not this complaint falls within a jurisdiction, which is fatal. If it does not, some common referrals are the Internal Affairs Bureau or the Office of the Chief of the Department. Also, some referrals may be MTA. MTA has like their own law enforcement, so sometimes civilians have a hard time deciphering, which agency is which. So we like to refer cases that aren't within our jurisdiction. And with that process, we always make sure we notify that civilian, so we keep them in the loop throughout the entire process. We, send them a letter and tell them that your case has been referred to this agency, and you can continue with your case there. So if it does fall within our jurisdiction, it will be sent to the investigations department, and the investigator will determine whether or not a case is mediation eligible. So some common examples of cases that are mediation eligible is, let's say, sexual misconduct cases or excessive force cases. We don't want to put our complainants in the same room as and their alleged aggressor. So we don't want to do that. If the case is mediation eligible, these mediations are carried through by a third party mediator, so they don't work for the CCRB or the NYPD. And this is a voluntary decision between the officer and the civilian, so everyone gets a say on whether or not they want to participate. And this usually has a high satisfaction rate when cases can be mediated. If, let's say, for instance, a civilian is not satisfied or the mediation just didn't work, this will be pushed to the investigations department. The investigations department will start investigating by interviewing the complainant, interviewing the witnesses. They would also locate any type of video evidence, so body-worn camera footages, locating any type of cameras. Let's say that an incident happened outside of a bodega. They will take those cameras from the streets to review and complete their investigation. They will also locate NYPD documents as well that are needed to complete the investigation. And we have a field team that may assist. So a lot of times, we have things that are going on in our lives. We can't necessarily make an interview if it's in person or whatnot. So the CCRB understands that, and that's why our field team would help. If a person doesn't feel comfortable with coming to our office, we meet them where they're at. If they want to have this interview at the McDonald's near their house, we will be happy to come and conduct the interview, because we want to make it as comfortable as possible for the civilians. Lastly, the NYPD officers, they need to cooperate, or they must cooperate with our investigation, and they cooperate by giving a sworn statement. Now, if this sworn statement happens to be false, that will be another allegation that the CCRB will investigate in that case. So very important thing to note. Within one case, there can be several allegations. So let's say one allegation is a false statement, excessive force, and foul language. Those three allegations will be investigated one by one. So that way, the investigator is doing thorough work to make sure that these allegations are true, and, give everyone a fair chance in this process. So after the investigation happens, the investigator will present their recommendations to a 3-member panel. And this basically means that out of the 15 members, out of the 15-member board, 3 members will be selected to a case. And they will, review the investigator's findings and make that final recommendation. Now, that final recommendation will go to the police commissioner because the police commissioner has to approve of that recommendation, right? If the police commissioner does not approve, they will have to give us a deviation letter that basically explains the purpose of them declining our recommendation. And lastly, if a panel substantiates one or more allegations against an officer and then recommends charges and specifications, the matter goes to the administrative prosecution unit. And I will speak about that unit further. So, something that I really love to highlight about the CCRB is our civilian assistance unit, right? We understand that sometimes a case does not just stop with investigation. You know, people need the help if they experience something that's traumatic with a police officer. I know when I get stopped over by a police officer when I'm driving, I don't even do anything wrong. All my papers are right, but I still feel that anxiousness and that nervousness because it's still an authoritative figure stopping you. So I can only imagine, a person that actually experiences trauma with a police officer. So we have the CAU, and this is staffed with licensed social workers and victim advocates that act as an important point of contact to connect civilians with the needed social and psychological support services. So we connect civilians to mental health services, food assistance, other legal assistance, getting help with health insurance, or other social services. Maybe a mother or a father needs to attend an interview, but they don't have childcare. We can help direct them to the needed childcare, so we can make sure that during this hardship, we are lending that helping hand to these civilians that are in need. So I'm just going to just real briefly explain the outcomes of the investigations. So firstly, there's 4 dispositions. The first one is substantiated, and we may hear this term a lot during the CCRB. And this just basically means that there's sufficient credible evidence to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the officer committed the alleged act and that this constitutes as misconduct. So basically, in simpler terms, there's enough evidence and to prove, that means that we can prove this 50% plus a feather that the officer committed the alleged act. So that's what the preponderance of evidence means. Like 50% plus a feather, we have enough evidence to prove that this has happened and that this constitutes a misconduct. So secondly, unable to determine means there's not sufficient credible evidence to prove that the officer committed the alleged act, right? And this means that it's unclear whether or not misconduct occurred. Thirdly, unfounded means there's sufficient credible evidence to prove that the officer did not commit the alleged act. This means that the incident just plainly didn't happen. And lastly, within NYPD guidelines, this officer, we have sufficient credible evidence to prove 50% plus a feather that the officer engaged in this alleged act. They did do this, but they were justified in doing so because of the patrol guide that we analyzed. So therefore, misconduct did not occur. So lastly, well, not lastly, so going back to the administrative prosecution unit, right? This is a prime example. So we have attorneys that are completely civilian. So we have prosecutors and attorneys that we hire that are civilian that try the most egregious cases of misconduct. So an important and prominent example is the case of Daniel Pantaleo, the officer who held Eric Garner in that fatal chokehold. So what the prosecutors at the APU at our unit proved was that, the officer, Daniel Pantaleo, committed the alleged act. Secondly, that the officer committed misconduct. And thirdly, that the board's recommendation of termination is justified for the misconduct that that officer Pantaleo did. So this is very prominent. This just goes to show that we have civilian attorneys that try the most egregious cases. They try it at one police plaza. They go before the trial commissioner, and the trial commissioner agreed with this. They agreed with the findings of with the argument of the prosecutors. So why file a CCRB complaint, right? So we have a policy department that gathers data and develops data-driven challenges that impacts the CCRB. So we have we have a new report that's called the 2020 George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protest report. And well, first I'll go through our policies. So I have a couple of resources that I want to show you guys that basically kind of shows the works that the policy department has gathered. So I'm going to share my screen to go to the policies. So here. So first, a great resource that our policy department has, gathered data is our complaint activity map. And basically the complaint activity map is a plethora of data that our data analysts have analyzed. And this shows pretty much how many complaints your precinct is getting. We have dates ranging all the way back to 2006. So this is a comprised database that is very expansive. So we're going to go to 2022 because that was last year. And it's always on 2020. So you're going to have to like change it. But if you go to 2022, and I know that CB14 is governed by the 70th precinct, if I'm not mistaken. So if you just hover over it, it's kind of like weird. Okay, great. So last year, the 70th precinct received 59 total complaints. Complaints within force, excessive force was 28. Abuse of authority was 44. Discourtesy was 18, and offensive language was 2. And like I had said previously, abuse of authority always seems to be the most complaints because it's discretion. So as you can see, right, the bluer the precincts are, the higher the complaint volume is. So, compared to the 75th, that's the bluest. So the 70th, it's right there. But, each complaint that is coming it's a person that's affected. So this is some really great data that we have to share. Also, another great resource that we have is our member of service records. So the CCRB, with legislation, we were able to, have an expansive database that has all of the members of service from the NYPD. You can check, to see if they have any active CCRB cases or inactive cases. And this empowers civilians with information because, we have the right to know what type of officers are stopping us and enforcing the law. So if you have an issue with an officer and you want to see whether or not they have any complaints with the CCRB to see if they have a trend of abuse of authority or discourtesy, you can check this right here. If you just type in their name, their shield number, and command and rank, you'll be able to find those things. And lastly, we have our 2020 George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protest report. So if you go to policy, you'll see reports, right? You're going to see, you go to issue-based reports. We do monthly statistical reports, but the issue-based reports are more interesting because you get to see the different challenges that we face when investigating complaints. So the most recent was one that was issued February 6th, is the 2020 protest report. So this is how it looks like. It's super, super, super long. I'm not going to go through everything of it, but I'm just going to share with you guys some findings. So the CCRB received 321 complaints related to the protest report. And we were able to investigate only 226 complaints of 146 members of service. So 88 complaints of misconduct were substantiated. 59 complaints were, this means that we were unable to identify the officer. 50 complaints we were unable to determine whether or not misconduct happened, and this is because we had an insufficient amount of evidence. 18 complaints were within NYPD guidelines, and lastly, 11 complaints were unfounded. So we see that 140 substantiated allegations were for excessive force. For the 2020 protest, excessive force beat abuse of authority. That was the highest volume of allegations. And for the APU, our Administrative Prosecution Unit, we prosecuted against 62 officers, and we have those cases that are pending. And some troubles that we were having were like, for instance, the officers were hiding their shield number and their command. Also, there was not enough, trackable evidence, right? So officers were being pulled from different precincts to go to report to a protest, and they were using protective equipment of other officers. So when we had called those officers that committed the alleged act of, whatever, let's say they pepper sprayed someone, or let's say, for instance, right, I'm an officer from the 75th precinct, and I go to the 70th precinct, and I use someone's riot gear, and I pepper spray, a civilian. When they call that, officer to the investigations, because they can track the shield number, it happens to not be the officer who committed the alleged act, because that officer wasn't wearing their own riot gear. Someone from another precinct was wearing their riot gear. So those were the types of issues that we were facing. And there's a huge list of other things that we were facing, like we weren't able to, the request to be fulfilled was taking too long with the NYPD. So yeah, these are some things that were hard for us during that protest.
Hi, I'm
Okay.
sorry to interrupt. It's past the half hour, so I was wondering if we could try to wrap it up real quick, and if we could have some Q&A.
No worries. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, but that's basically it for my presentation. I just wanted to go over the resources and show you guys all of the data. And thank you. And if I have any questions in the chat, I guess I can answer those first. Okay, Corvizom said, but wouldn't that then escalate things? I don't want cops cursing at me. I do see your point, right? But let's say if a civilian is, they're constantly cursing at an officer, and, that officer is not going to get them to cooperate by not giving that same level of energy back. And this is from the police patrol guide. So this is not what the CCRB is saying. This is what we have found in the police patrol guide. That doesn't mean that, some of the things in the police patrol guide, the CCRB agrees with, but that just means that the investigator, they found that in the police patrol guide, foul language can be used, but it has certain limitations. So another question is the shade of blue on the complaint map controlled for population? Is it a total number of complaints or a complaint per 1,000 map? That's a good question. Let me just make sure I check so I won't give any false information. So I believe, okay, so just had
That's okay. I scrolled over a couple of them. And it looks like
okay, it's
they're
complaint
total
per
numbers.
I'm sorry, it's complaint per 10,000. So it's yeah, that it's the second answer that you had.
Thank you, Venus.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Venus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now we'll have Jill Cornell from Community Engagement, our Community Engagement Specialist from New York City Emergency Management.
Florencia, before you move on, did you want to, Detective Nuzzi was able to sign on?
Is he on?
Yeah.
Okay, so Detective Nuzzi, could you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Hi.
Yes, we hear and see you.
Good. Sorry, I'm actually in Target shopping. Me and my partners had training today, so we would had to do an early shift, so we had to miss most of our day in the police academy. So the people who don't know me, my name is Detective Nuzzi, 70 Precinct. Just chiming in. I have to apologize for our commanding officer. He usually does attend these meetings and gives basic synapse of everything in the precinct, but he's not here, so I don't want to speak for him. So I'm really just going to say hello. Anyone has any kind of general questions I can answer. If not, thank you, Sean, Heidi, and Valencia for letting me speak and saying hello to everybody. Those questions, anything? If not, that's it. I just wanted to say hello then.
Thank you so much for just coming.
Well, it's good seeing everybody again.
Always good to see you.
Good to see
Good
you.
seeing you.
Thank you, everyone.
You're
You're
here,
welcome.
Detective Nuzzi.
Stay safe, Scotty.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, y'all. I'll talk to you guys later. I'll see everybody soon.
Scott.
Thank you.
And Venus, you're welcome to stick around. There'll be interesting information from OME, but you're not certainly not required to. So if you need to hop off at any point, don't hesitate to do so, and we'll circle back with any other questions that arise.
Thank you. I'll hang on for a little bit longer just in case anybody wants to text me something. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank
Okay,
you.
back to you, Madam Co-Chairs.
Okay, so at this time, Jill, if you're ready,
I'm ready.
it's your turn. Thank you for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank you
Alrighty.
for having us. We really appreciate the invitation. I'm Jill Cornell, Community Engagement Specialist at New York City Emergency Management. And before I get started, Ready New York told me that you were interested in our symposium that's coming up next week on March 7th. Is that right? Okay, good. So I want to put, let's see if how these come. Yes, I have 2 links there in the chat because there are 2 ways to come to the symposium this year. And the symposium is specifically about community emergency planning. The first link that has www.workcast.com is if you want to attend virtually. It is a hybrid symposium. It's our first ever, so fingers crossed. If you can come in person, and it is an all-day event, we feed you breakfast and lunch. It's at Baruch College in Manhattan, so it's pretty easy to get to, not too far uptown. And for both, you would need to register. So the second link is an Eventbrite link, and you can just click on it and register for the symposium. If you want more information, we have Commissioner Curry is going to be addressing everyone. We have a dynamite speaker, a keynote speaker from, hold on, I'm sorry. I'm not directly involved with the symposium, so it will come to me, but she is from Staten Island. We also have a group from the Bronx presenting about their resiliency hubs that they have begun with some funding from the mayor's office for climate and environmental justice, MOCEJ. That has a new name with the current administration. So that's really exciting because this is a group that wasn't on my personal radar and that we didn't know about. But when we put out a call for proposals, they just signed up and had just a dynamite presentation. It's a really great group near, I want to say, kind of mid-Bronx. We have City Harvest talking about food insecurity, and they are very deeply involved with New York City VOAD. VOAD stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, and City Harvest has been a big partner feeding everyone, and I remember them from my volunteer days during Hurricane Sandy. They were everywhere with their trucks dropping off pallets of food, so we're really excited to have them come. And we also have a presentation from the American Red Cross about preparing diverse communities. I know Community Board 14 has the lovely, I like to call it the lovely mosaic of New York City, which you just look at the faces and the names that are represented here. It always makes me smile. And with that, I'm going to segue into the Ready New York presentation. I do want to be mindful of the time. So how much time do I have? Because I can shorten the presentation to meet your needs.
Sean, I'll defer.
Well, we usually give each presentation a half an hour, including Q&A. So
Okay.
somewhere up
So
to
maybe
there.
I'll go to 7:30 and how's that sound? Great. Okay. Okay, we just have to wait for the PowerPoint to kind of queue up there. Should be with us shortly. Can everybody see my screen and the presentation? Just someone nod their head. Thumbs up.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Perfect. So this is the Ready New York Emergency Preparedness presentation, and I'll send it on to the community board address that I have. If anybody wants to take a deep dive, all of our materials are online, and they'll be listed in the presentation.
Would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. So Ready New York is part of the Community Engagement Bureau, and we have three main programs. The first one is the one that I'm here with you tonight, which is Ready New York. It's the public education campaign for the agency. And the second one is community preparedness. And that's actually the team that on my blue sky role, that's what I serve on. And we help local organizations build capacity within their communities to prepare for, respond to, and recover from an emergency. And that's really about community emergency planning. So it's something that's done in the community, identifying local resources and putting them together in a plan. Lastly, we have our volunteer program, which we call NYC CERT. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. And our volunteers undergo training by NYPD, FDNY, and New York City Emergency Management for basic response skills, including first aid, search and rescue, and the big culminating exercise is fire suppression. So that's done at headquarters at 165 Cadman Plaza East. There's the community symposium slide right in there. So those of you who have a screen reader can read the QR code, but again, I've put it into the chat. That might be easier for some of you. The date has passed to request accommodations, but we always have CART, so we will have interpretation there. It's really exciting because our program has expanded over the last few years, certainly since the last time I visited Community Board 14, and we have emergency networks up and running in all 5 boroughs and multiple neighborhoods. Brooklyn will have a very robust participation this year with an addition of a network from North Brooklyn, and we're actively doing outreach throughout the borough. So hit me up if you'd like to learn more about that program. And our theme that's very colorful. The theme is communities ahead of emergencies. So I haven't seen this presentation, obviously, so I'm very excited to see a live action flyer, which does outline, as I mentioned, the 2 different ways to participate and with some of our exciting speakers that we have lined up. We are hiring. There's always lots of jobs. We encourage you, if you're interested, if you have experience doing preparedness or in the emergency management field, check out our jobs. We have a lot of openings, so we're really actively looking. And we are also looking for the Ready School of the Year. So again, you'll see all this information when I forward the PowerPoint. Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of how to get ready for any emergency, and we do an all hazards approach. So the 3 steps are: 1, making a plan; 2, gathering supplies; and 3, staying informed. The image on the make a plan part of this slide is of our emergency plan. A person with a pen that says Ready New York is about to fill in some information on transportation. The middle slide has a little go kit with some supplies. And the last slide on the right is a screenshot of the Notify NYC app. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Again, to get your own copy of the My Emergency Plan, you can scan the QR code in the upper right. It's also available in the languages, 13 languages listed there. We change the guide every year to adjust to the current conditions in New York City, especially with regards to our coastal evacuation zones. So what will happen is that there's a separate hurricane guide that gets updated on a regular basis. We can come and do this presentation in person at your house of worship, a community-based organization. Hit us up. And we can also have someone come if you have a body of folks, like say in a house of worship or a community organization that speak a language other than English. We're happy to provide an interpreter, but we do need advance notice for that. Making a plan, we encourage folks to create an emergency support network. Page 5 of the plan shows you how to do that. Putting down your health and life-saving information and having a transportation plan. So for me, that means knowing what I can do if the F train doesn't work, because I live on the F line. And there are a few buses that run here. I also have the G, so I'm always thinking about my alternatives, because many times, especially on the weekends, the F is not running at my stop, which is not too far from you all. And knowing how and when to evacuate or when to stay in place is an important part of anyone's preparedness plan. 2 places, near and far, where you might meet people. So the location near you might be a 24-hour grocery or the steps of the precinct. And then someplace further away, it's really up to you to make that decision with your friends and family. Can take a leaf from the NYPD and always learn like the exits whenever you're in a new location, like a shopping mall, a restaurant, a movie theater. When I observe the officers in those locations, they're always facing any entry points into a room, just kind of always scanning, keeping their eye out in case trouble happens to come in and they can see it full on, as opposed to having their back to it. And there's a lot more guidance that's in the guide. So I'm going to keep soldiering on. Knowing your evacuation zone, I think there's part of CB14 that's on the green area there, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that I was actually at the office a number of years ago when an extreme rainfall happened and the streets were flooded, everywhere was flooded. And I saw the need for also having a plan for extreme rainfall, because these rains are really getting more intense. Ida and then Winter Storm Elliott put us all on warning last year, and then Ida a couple years before that. So knowing what your hurricane evacuation zone number is important. You can always find out through the magic number in New York City, which is 311. In case you don't have the access to the website. So the Know Your Zone website, if you type into your search engine NYC Know Your Zone, you'll go right to it. In the Hurricane Evacuation Zone Finder, this image here is of New York City, and you see a little wheelchair icon throughout the map, and that indicates facilities that are accessible. So we place our facilities outside of the evacuation zone areas, and we strive for full accessibility. It's not always possible depending on when. Mostly these are Department of Education buildings. So in the summer, a lot of them have construction. So we're always checking to make sure the sites are open. All that information is given to 311, and it's also uploaded by our GIS department onto this map. So you can look at it ahead of time to get a general idea of what the nearest evacuation center is to you, but you always want to check it right before, within 24 hours or 48 hours of the event, just to make sure. Now we're at step 2. See, we're just plugging away here. So this is gathering supplies. In the middle of our My Emergency Plan is a visual aid. That's the image on the right, which is a backpack with different supplies that you should have in your go bag. First aid kit, personal care items, snacks, water, a whistle, really important, low tech, but very effective in case your airway is blocked, about alerting first responders as to your location. Flashlight with the batteries, and if you're using a non-LED, we recommend, and the fire department wants you to keep the batteries separate outside of the unit. A transistor radio, some personal protective gear or cleanup gear. This actual plan that you're going to fill out and put into the go bag. Small bills. If anybody remembers Sandy, and if you were in any of the affected areas, the heavily affected areas like in the Rockaway, who didn't have power for a number of days and even weeks. There were no bank machines that were open in those first, especially that first week. So any kind of, milk or eggs you needed to buy at the store, it was only with cash, and small bills are best. And they're also good for like co-pays for prescriptions. Copies of your identification, extra pair of glasses if you use glasses like I do, and a notepad and a pen or pencil is hugely important, so you can write down the scads of information that you're going to get after a big emergency, like where you can get help, where, phone numbers. You just want to have that little extra low-tech notebook, because trust me, when push comes to shove and the emergency happens, are we calm, cool, and collected? No, we can barely remember our name and our social security number. So the ability to write things down will really help keep you calm and get you into recovery. This is another slide that goes into greater detail about having some more supplies at home. You can also customize it for the weather, have hot weather supplies. If you have a car, we suggest you keep a little kit in your car, especially if you're traveling to a colder climate where they experience a lot of snow, like Buffalo, right? And we know they got hit pretty hard earlier this year, or late last year, I should say. Staying informed, Notify NYC. I hope you are all subscribed as active members of the Public Safety Committee. I'm not even going to ask if anyone is subscribed, but you can subscribe to Notify NYC in the 13 languages. You'll get emergency alerts. You get options to opt in to short messaging services, like when we had COVID, you could opt in to get just COVID messages. If you're going to the Thanksgiving Day parade, you can get special notices just for that. Monkeypox, we had just a few texts that went out from the health department specifically about monkeypox. It's really a wonderful, customizable notification system. If you prefer to get things inside an app, you can get the Notify NYC app and get all your messages there. It's just really the first thing that you should do to be completely prepared and up to date with New York City information. Here are more QR codes. We have a plethora of QR codes, which work great when we're online. So I'm going to keep this screen up for a little while, so that if anybody wants to scan it, they can. You can sign up online. You can also get signed up through my favorite number, 311. if you have any challenges. I don't think that's this group because you're all online now, but for some folks who have challenges getting online, they can always do it via 311. And I am not, oh, we're on the recap. I'm not going to play the video. That's a little extra bonus, but we have lots of lovely video. Whoops. No, no, no. Don't start. We're not going to play you. Okay. So you can always contact the Ready New York program for any questions, or if you want to learn how to sign up to get your own account to have this presentation done at your house of worship or community organization. I do recommend the fuller presentation. Is a great way to keep fresh on it. I find that when I listen, I learn something new every time. If you want to give us feedback about what we've presented, please use yet another QR code. Another great way to get information is to follow us on social media. Twitter, especially Notify NYC on Twitter, gets a lot of the current information comes out there. LinkedIn, that's more about job postings and big events that we do like the symposium. Facebook has a little bit more of stories about what our agency's doing. YouTube just has a whole host of great videos that run the gamut. They're in different languages. I love Hindsight is 2020. That's a great presentation to share with friends and family. And also on Instagram. On the left is the sign up for the community preparedness newsletter. But when I send this copy of the presentation tomorrow, there will be a link in my signature where you can sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get notices about tons of different kind of emergency / preparedness events throughout the city and ways to stay informed and get more information and to get involved. And now we have time for 2 minutes of questions.
Thank you. Sean, can you see if anyone has their hands up?
Nina Subgear has a hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Nina.
Hi. Yeah, so one of the things that I just think, has to be super, super stressed, especially before there's an actual emergency or evacuation warnings, is for people to make sure that they bring their medicine or bring enough medicine for a few days and have their pharmacy information and names of their medications in some shape or form, because I helped out as an NYC Medical Reserve Corps after Hurricane Sandy. And we spent an entire night. Basically, we were doing a lot of calling pharmacies and trying to find, blood pressure and heart medicines and diabetes medicines and things. And, people going without those things for a few days could be pretty disastrous. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
Oh, I love your 2 cents, Nina. Thank you so much for sharing that. When I do the fuller presentation, I spend a lot more time on it, especially if I'm doing the presentation for older adults. And my tip is for them to staple the list of medications directly get a copy of it, staple it right into the emergency plan. But I couldn't agree more. On some of our videos, there's one, I'll make sure that also goes in there, where the woman who's exiting because her building is unstable, she has her medications in a Ziploc bag that she just easily grabs, like it's in her kitchen that's near the door. She grabs the Ziploc bag and she puts it in her go bag. And to me, that's just the most common sense way, easy way for us to get that medication right into the bag as we're making that exit when we know we have to go. But your comment is perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Jill. Is
Thank
there
you, Jill.
any-
That was so informative.
I
you're
don't see
welcome.
any more hands, but I also want to thank Jill and recall and appreciate the visit and talking about community facilities. And I did see on the website, and if you said it tonight, I skipped a couple beats because I got distracted, but I did see on the website that there are ways for community facilities to sign up to be either training locations for certain OEM trainings or to be places where people can go in an emergency. So we'll get that link up with the presentation too.
Yeah, I'll make sure that you have that link. I have a list of things that I'm going to send to you, and I'll make sure to highlight that.
Good. And I
It's
made a
on the
note of
website.
myself.
It's not necessarily in the Ready New York presentation, but it's on our website. And we'd love to come out and take a look of local facilities. The primary requirement is accessibility for people that use wheelchairs or mobility devices. And we have a team that comes out and sort of checks it out. But knowing where that is in your neighborhood ahead of time is a game changer, can really save us a lot of time and can get recovery and response into the community much faster.
Excellent. Happy to help with outreach on that.
Fantastic.
And before, sorry, while I'm unmuted, also just a reminder, I know that CERT will be there, but just a reminder to everybody that the 16th Annual Youth Conference is coming up on April 3rd at the Subo building, and our the website has some of the information on it, and we're going to get the registration forms up, but I can, that's right on the website under the youth link.
Thanks, Sean. Yes. I noticed that Corazon had a number of questions. So is if no one else has any question for Jill, is it possible to, or would Venus, would you like to put your contact so he can contact you?
That's been arranged, Florencia.
Okay.
They communicated, and we'll close the circle tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. So I think if no one else have any questions, then we have, what is it, new business? Is it old business or, hold on, let me just check.
I think we try to do it in one fell swoop by calling it other business.
Okay.
Right, sure.
Thanks again for having me. I'm going to sign off.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Jill.
Appreciate it, Jill.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Very informative. So is there other business? Do we have other business, Sean?
Nothing that has come to my attention. I think I squeezed it in by mentioning the youth conference. I guess it bears saying out loud that I've had the conversations with the co-chairs of this committee that there's some interest in doing, we'll do an in-person meeting late in the spring before we conclude for summer break. We'll work on, arranging for hands-on CPR training and what's the other one? Florencia Hendy, NORCAN?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So stay tuned, but we'll see you at the youth conference in the meantime.
But one more thing, Florenzia had an idea about helping out the homeless. Did you want to talk about that a little bit, Florenzia? Homeless mothers?
Oh, okay. I was just saying there's an emergency homeless shelter for women of domestic violence. And so we were thinking, Hindi and I, we could get assistance in having some baskets prepared for the mothers
For Mother's Day.
for Mother's Day.
Okay.
Go
So if
ahead.
anybody is interested in helping out with that in any way, shape, or form, email the office, and then I'll make sure you all have one another's email addresses to continue planning that.
Great.
Thanks, Sean.
And maybe we could mention that at the monthly meeting also in case there are
Yeah,
more.
put that in your report so that you can generate some, interest in volunteerism with that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I am
Thank you,
I'll
Nina.
be getting the list on the 10th. The
Perfect.
list of the mothers.
Perfect. So Nina's volunteered to help us, Florencia. So
Oh, thanks, Nina.
Are we getting stuff like donated, like body care, sanitary napkins, and that kind of thing, shampoos, whatever? Or
Where,
we would like to get that stuff donated.
okay,
yes.
I guess we all need to walk into Target and ShopRite and wherever else, Amazing Savings, and hit them up for whatever we can get.
Yes, definitely.
If we could get donations from liquor stores, it would be also conducive.
I think
for the
we'll
volunteers.
steer away from that.
Joe, hey, Joe.
For the
What if we
volunteers.
had an emergency and it's January 1st? You know, it's important.
So if anyone know of any ideas of how we can go about this, Sean, do you think if we got a letter that we could actually utilize that for asking for donations from some of these stores within the community?
Let me check. Let me check about that, because there are, as a city agency, soliciting as a city agency
Right.
has some constraints. We're not, Community Board 14 feels like a nonprofit organization sometimes, but it's actually a governmental agency. So let
It
me
is.
feel that out a little bit more, Valencia.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah.
I appreciate
I
it.
can try to gently twist arms, but I don't know about direct asks.
Got okay.
Okay, I got you.
Whatever
We
works.
appreciate it. Thank you. And anyone else if you have any idea, as Sean said, you can contact the office and she will pass it on. Thank you. With that being said, is there anything else, or can we adjourn? Can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Gail.
Second.
Anyone
Beautiful
second?
meeting. Thank you, Florencia. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, do we have a
Thanks.
second?
Thanks, Joe. You've been quiet tonight, Joe.
Yeah, I know.
Eerie.
It's very difficult.
Zip it, Joe. Zip it.
You're okay. Are you okay?
You know, Gail and
He's
I were
having a
away.
liquor emergency.
Gail and I were away together.
Yes. With your spouse. Don't say it that way.
I
Gail,
know, I
do
was
not-
just about to stop the recording right there, and I said,
Exactly.
I have to let it run a little
Please.
further to get that explained.
And we're all smiling.
Yes. My daughter was
Thanks,
so
Sean.
pleased to meet your wife.
Sweet, sweet. Thank you, everybody. God
Good
bless
night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
All right.
soon.
Good night,
Good night,
everyone. Thanks,
everyone.
Sean. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gail. Good
Thank
night,
you.
Good
Joe.
night, everyone.
Good night.
All righty.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, Shahid. Hey, Mansoor.